Welcome to Scary Stories, the channel that tells you scary stories.
Wow, I take a day off and all hell breaks loose, huh? Sure got bad fast out there, didn't it? Well, come on in here and hang out with your old pal Bigfoot, and I promise no politics for about the next 20 minutes. Although, I also promise that at the end of that 20 minutes, I am gonna beg you to join our secret subscriber club because wow, relying on advertising seems to be becoming a thing of the past. Please lock the door behind you. You and I are leaving that world temporarily and entering a world where the worst thing we have to fear is Dogman. Oh, wait a second. Dogman can be pretty scary. Especially in these two stories we're doing on this episode. They're actually two parts of the same story from the same contributor. I got this first installment a couple or 3 weeks ago, and I got part 2 just a day or two ago. The submitter claims these are true stories, but I have done no research to check if that's so, and I'm just going to be presenting them for entertainment purposes only. Let's get started with part 1, which we call Dogman in Our Basement. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I have a kind of a long story to tell you about my family and Dogman. I might break it up into 2 parts depending. Let me start at the beginning and see how far I get. Okay. This was about 5 years ago when my family and I lived in rural Michigan. My parents both worked hard to create careers for themselves where they could work out of home and therefore live wherever they wanted. At first, they wanted to travel around like Billy Batson and Mentor in the ancient TV version of Shazam, visiting the entire country and having one long learning experience. The fact that they would then need to homeschool me wiped that idea out, since I was still in high school at the time, and they were not going to be able to homeschool me on algebra or whatever. So, because of these weird complications they hadn't foreseen, the dream of living on the road translated somehow into buying a house in Michigan of all places. I think they got it because it was cheap and had a lot of land around it, but it was scrub land, and the house was old and not in very good shape. My parents didn't want to do much to fix it up either, as they were still planning on hitting the road once I left for college. So, basically, it was a crappy life where we all exchanged our happiness for the idea that somewhere later down the road, we could resume trying to live our dreams. I was the only one in the family who thought this was a bit crazy. Mom and Dad had their heads buried in making their next deadlines and never really were able to think much past that. So, one time the 3 of us went shopping, which was a huge deal out there. We had to drive miles to get to a supermarket, so we tended to do one huge shopping every 5 or 6 weeks. The idea was to do it for 2 months, but nothing we got ever lasted 2 months. At any rate, this one time we were getting back from the supermarket just around dusk at night. It was starting to get darkish and the sky was turning colors, but it was still technically daytime. As we were getting stuff out of the back of the car and carrying it in, I saw something weird in the basement. Our basement had these small windows that were up about 6 or 6.5 feet off the ground. I remember they were over my head when I was in the basement, and I would have to look up to see out of them. On the outside, they were just slightly higher than ground level, just barely poking above the dirt. So when I looked down there and could swear I was seeing eyes looking back at me, that kind of surprised me more than a little. I brought the bag in the house, then asked my dad if he could come look at something with me. He said he would after we got done unpacking, but I asked him to come right then, and he did. We got back outside, and I looked at that window. Now there was nothing there. Undeterred, I brought Dad over and told him something had been staring at me from that window, but I wasn't sure if it was a person or an animal. Dad looked concerned and cursed under his breath. He bent down and peered in, but he still didn't see anything. He stood back up, looking as confused as I felt. "What do you think we should do?" he asked me plainly. "If it's a burglar, we need to call the cops. If it's an animal, we need to call animal control. And if it's your imagination, I need to call a shrink for you," he said, smiling and shoving my shoulder to demonstrate he was kidding about the last part. But he was right. I wasn't sure what we should do either. I stared at that window, wishing that whatever it was would show itself again. Dad suggested we finish unpacking everything before stuff melted, then figure out what to do afterward. I agreed that made sense, and we grabbed more bags and headed back inside with them. As we were putting food in the fridge and the pantry, we both heard my mother scream outside. I think we both thought the same thing, and we ran out there to the driveway to see what had scared her. You guessed it. She was staring in horror at that window, and she told us outright that she saw a dogman. She actually used that word and said she saw a dogman in our basement. Dad laughed, or like he snorted, trying to suppress a laugh, but I wasn't laughing. I asked her to describe it, and she said at first she thought she was looking at the face of a demon. It was glaring at her and baring its fangs. That stopped Dad's laughter. But Mom said the demon face pulled back from the window, and as it did, she could see dog ears on top and broad, muscular, human-like shoulders. Dad got right on his cell phone and called animal control, telling them that somehow a large, vicious, wild dog had gotten into their basement while they were out. He believed Mom about the dog part, but not about the shoulders part. He thought that was an illusion. Mom was furious and called the police, saying there was an intruder in her basement. The two of them were in full argument mode with each other when the animal control guys came, followed soon by the police. In both cases, Dad told them that his son and his wife had seen a very large dog somehow in our basement, but in both cases, Mom contradicted him and claimed it was a dogman. There were a lot of people exchanging weird glances that evening. So, the upshot of it was that animal control and the cops both went down there, and they both came up empty. No dogs, no burglars, and especially no dogman. The police warned my parents never to do anything like that again, and I knew that from then on, we were going to have to defend ourselves from whatever that thing was. That night, my parents argued loudly, and my father was forced to sleep downstairs on the couch. The weird upshot of that was that all night he was kept up by sounds of someone or something moving around underneath him in the basement. There had to be some way that whatever or whoever that was getting in and out. So The next morning, my father went down there searching around. He found nothing, no way in or out. Until, that is, he bumped into a big old metal cabinet down there and hurt his shoulder. While he was rubbing it and waiting for the pain to subside, Dad saw something behind the cabinet. Pulling it away from the wall, he discovered a sort of a large rat hole. He called me down and showed it to me. He asked me if what I saw could have fit in that hole. I had only seen eyes, so I couldn't really know. Mom had seen a man-sized dog-headed thing, so she would say that the hole was too small. It was about the size of hole a poodle could fit through, but whatever we saw was large enough to look out that basement window, which is more than 6 feet off the ground. Dad said maybe it was a smaller dog and had jumped up to the window somehow. Dogs can jump, he informed me, and I said yes, I knew that, but I remained skeptical. Why? Because dogs can't pull large metal cabinets back over a hole they've just crawled through. That's why. Dad and I drove into some mall and got concrete and a metal plate, and we filled that hole and bolted that metal plate in front in case it really was a rat hole. My father said rats can eat concrete, or at least eat away at it, so the metal plate bolted onto the concrete was an extra precaution. When we were done, Mom came down and looked at what we had done and laughed at us. She said fixing a rat hole wasn't going to keep a Dogman out of the house. Yet, it did. We stopped hearing anything in the basement after that. It was one of those sort of shrug your shoulder moments for me and Mom, while Dad suspected we were both batty and imagining things. I'm going to fast forward about 14 or 15 months after that in part 2, which I'll send you soon. And we'll read you part 2, entitled Dogman's Forest Lair, right after this.
Hey, Biggity Foot. What are you doing for July 4th, yo?
I don't know, Debbie, but I do know what I'm doing the weekend after.
OMG! What's that, yo?
I'm gonna buy other people's old stuff and turn it into my new stuff.
Good, cause your nest could sure use some, redecorating, yo.
Come to the Collectibles Extravaganza, hosted by the king of pop culture himself, TV's famous Gary Summers, who appeared as an expert on pop culture on the PBS Antiques Roadshow. It's the weekend of July 6th and 7th, 2019, at the air-conditioned Regency Hotel, where Route 111 meets Route 495 in Boxborough, Massachusetts, home of the Wolf People. See you there. Dogman's Forest Lair. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I'm the guy who sent you that story about a dogman in our basement. This continues after that one. So, we went a year with no dogman in the basement, and my father was pretty self-satisfied. He would bring up me and Mom seeing the dogman and say he was the only sane one in the house. It was getting pretty annoying to me, to be honest, and I can only imagine what Mom felt about it. So, one day, I went down to the basement and looked at the patch that Dad and I had put over that hole. It was still undisturbed, exactly as we had left it. I got an idea. Tunnels go somewhere. I could see when filling it in with concrete that this one expanded on for a long way in one direction, off into the darkness where I could see no further. It led out of the house and toward the woods. I figured nothing would be lost if I wandered in that direction for a while, just to see what I could see. I wandered around in the forest, and to my surprise, I actually found a cave. An honest-to-goodness cave in the forest. It was about 4 feet tall, and I was about to bend down and go inside when I noticed I was stepping all over dog tracks. Really, really big dog tracks. That froze me in place, and I took note of my surroundings. I became suddenly hyper aware of anything that might be around. Hearing and sensing nothing, I turned on my heel and ran home to get my dad. He told me it was too late to go out in the woods because it would be dark soon. He said we should go investigate the next day, which was Saturday. I was unhappy with this decision and prevailed upon him to follow me back to the site. Dad was lecturing me the entire time that I had my mother's imagination and that this was going to turn out to be another nothing burger. Mosquitoes bit us, and Dad grew grouchier and grouchier. When we finally reached the cave, though, he actually gasped. "Wow, there really is a cave entrance. So close to our home," he commented. Then he saw the dog tracks, and he grew even more troubled. Whatever left these tracks is not just a dog. It's too big. I asked him if this might be what Mom saw. I asked him if maybe this cave led to our basement before we filled it in. He said, maybe, but it made no sense how something that large could get into a hole that small. We fussed around the area for a while, looking to see if we could find anything else strange. But it would be hard to find something weirder than that cave. Dad suggested we cut into the woods a bit, then turn back and walk to the house to see if anything else might be in the forest over there. By this point, it was starting to get dark, and I was losing my curiosity in favor of wanting to be home and safe, but I followed my father. I was behind him and couldn't see what he was reacting to when he whispered, "My God, there's another one of them." I attempted to come around on the side of him to see what he could see, but instead, he grabbed me and pulled both of us behind a bush. I fell backward and landed hard, which annoyed me no end. I hadn't made the connection that something scary was going on that he was protecting me from. I thought at the time that he was being rude. Stupid of me, I know, but things were happening so fast, and I just wanted to go home. So, annoyed, I got on all fours and peered around my father to figure out what was going on. That's when I got the absolute surprise of my life. There was another cave. That's what my father had been referring to. It was much smaller than the previous one. This one would be too small for me to fit into, let alone my father. And yet, squeezing itself out of that hole was something with very broad shoulders, just like my mother had described. It was facing away from me and wriggling slowly out of the hole. Its waist appeared very narrow, and as it slowly emerged, it would enlarge somehow. The same happened with its bottom and legs. I watched the whole thing, and my father watched it too. Our jaws were hanging open, believe me. This was a hairy man, covered in dark fur, but it was squeezing out of this tiny cave entrance the way a rat would. You know how they say a rat can get through a hole the size of a quarter? Well, this thing was emerging from a hole that was maybe the size of a basketball. It was a hole smaller than the one we had patched in our basement, and yet this incredibly muscular, tall, man-shaped thing was pulling itself out of it. When that monster got out completely, it turned around in our direction, and we both pulled back behind the bush. I got a quick glance at its head, though, and my mother was right. This was a dog. It could be nothing else but a dog, yet it had the body of a man. And worse yet, we could hear it walking toward us. Dad and I made ourselves as small as we could, and we tried to breathe as quietly as we could. I actually held my breath, not wanting to risk it hearing me. We watched as this creature walked by, fully upright. We saw it from its left side, and then from behind, as it walked past like a gentleman, not like a brute. It was not hunched over, as an ape would be. It was, as I said, like a gentleman. It had no tail, but it had dog ears on top of its head. People ask if they were pointy ears or floppy, and I would say yes to both. They were essentially triangular, but flopped over at the ends as well. It had no tail, and I didn't see its front paws clearly at all. Its legs were bent backward, and it had large dog feet, not human feet. I imagine its hands must have been like paws as well, but I never saw them, so I don't really know. After it walked away, we stayed there until my father was certain it was gone, which to me felt like 6 years. I guess to Dad too, because he woke up the next morning with a streak of gray in his hair. His first, but definitely not his last. Mom and Dad got a camper and we went on the road by the next week. I dropped out of high school in senior year, planning on finishing it when things settled down. They never really did, though, and I haven't gone back so far. I've been working with my dad, and he doesn't require a diploma for employment. We did settle in another location since then, but I don't want to say where. I've got a girlfriend, and things are very relaxed and fun right now for the family in general. Dad is back to believing Mom, and Mom feels vindicated by what happened to us in the forest. You couldn't pay me to go back to that area in Michigan. That was too big a problem for any animal control person to handle. That was turf that humans just need to stay off of, because that cave system over there was Dogman's forest lair. And now, get ready for an all-new, completely uncensored, slightly bloody, and absolutely terrifying new Dogman story. Oh, wait. YouTube won't allow me to tell you stories like that on this channel. If you want to hear that, you're going to have to go to peterbernard.com and sign up for our paid subscribers club. You can choose any price you can afford for a 1-month subscription, and then every weekend, we tell you a story YouTube would never allow us to tell you on this channel. See you this Sunday for an all-new, very scary, completely uncensored Dogman story.
If you enjoyed this, please click like or consider subscribing. Remember to click the bell icon or you won't get notifications. If you want to listen to Bigfoot's secret uncensored story each Sunday, just go to peterbernard.com and become a paid subscriber. See you tomorrow. Same dog time, same dog channel.
Come back for more scary stories.